Hello and welcome back to That's What She Said. Today's episode is That's What She Said About a Parliament Rebooted. As we know, Bangladesh has entered a new political chapter. The 13th Parliament, formed after what many described as the country's first credible election in over 15 years, has now begun its first session. Within the first two sittings, the House has already delivered a mix of symbolism, tension, and political signaling. A new Speaker and Deputy Speaker were elected. The government tabled 133 ordinances issued during the interim administration, and the chambers saw protest slogans and an opposition walkout during the president's speech. The House also adopted a condolence motion remembering figures including Khaleda Zia and the martyrs of the July uprising, underscoring how closely this new parliament is tied to the country's recent political upheaval. However, the inclusion of convicted war criminals turned some heads and ruffled some feathers. The second day too saw debates and demands specifically surrounding the Constitution Reform Council. So the question now goes beyond what happened in the first few days of the session. After years of political deadlock, institutional erosion, and a historic uprising that reshaped Bangladesh's politics, what kind of parliament is the country trying to rebuild? To unpack that, we're joined today by Zaima Islam, senior reporter at the Daily Star and part of the team behind the newspaper's special coverage, Parliament Watch, through which she has been analyzing not just what politicians say in Parliament, but how the institution actually works, or fails to work, in practice. Before we dive in, on a quick note for our listeners, this is the final episode of Season 1 of That's What She Said, so it feels only fitting that we close this season with the conversation about the place where the country's laws, debates, and decisions are meant to unfold. Also, with the same person I was honored to begin the show with. Please welcome Zaima Islam. Zaima, welcome back to That's What She Said. I'm so happy that I got to open my show with you, and now I get to end the season with you. It's been a month. The last time we spoke, the elections didn't even take place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And now the election took place. We have a new government, new parliament, everything's happening.
Oh, gosh.
Just give me an overview of what's been going on.
Oh, gosh. I just remembered. Yes. Remember we were talking about
How we never got to vote.
And our fears for the election, all of that. We were talking about how, we were expecting that it's going to be a violent, drawn-out election. Yep. I'm glad none of that happened.
None of that happened, yeah.
Okay, we're terrible fortune tellers, just for the record.
No, but even though when I look back at that episode now, and I'm thinking, okay, no, that didn't happen, but I'm glad it didn't. I feel like we're seeing kind of a very fresh, new atmosphere. I'm not going to say negative or positive yet, but it's new nonetheless. What do you think?
So the first day that the parliament sat for this session, I logged in on the Bangladesh Parliament Facebook page. They were going live with what was going on inside the parliament, and I was watching that. I think that one live episode garnered something like 4.4 million views, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
That's 40 lakh people logging in and watching the parliamentarians sitting down. I mean, declaring who the speaker is.
Exactly.
Figuring out who they're going to have condolence motions for. Very procedural stuff. So nothing that's like super exciting in that sense. Like they're not debating laws off the bat.
Right.
But it's just the first day of parliament and,
So as a matter of fact, I was also watching it on Facebook. Even like all the comments over there, everyone's saying the same thing, that we're also excited to watch the parliament. They know perhaps nothing that exciting is going to happen. It's just the first sitting of the first session. But everyone was just waiting to see this new government in the new parliament.
Exactly. They were simply logging in to see their favorite lawmaker perhaps taking a seat.
Yeah.
They were logging in to see where the prime minister is sitting, where the opposition chief is sitting.
Right.
Things like that. It's like they were discovering parliament for the very first time. And I know that for the first time, I was equally attentive. Like this is the first time I'm, for example, locating where the treasury bench is.
Right.
I've never really paid attention to these before, because for the entirety of my adult life, the parliament has been a bit of a joke.
Right. Yeah.
This is the heart of democracy, by design, at least. This is where the people's representatives are supposed to be sitting.
Right.
This is where
the big decisions are being made.
This is where law is supposed to be made. This is a place where it's going to be non-discriminatory.
Yeah.
People are going to be sitting here in the same seat, regardless of their educational qualification, regardless of their age, regardless of their political beliefs.
Yeah.
What else? Their financial background. It's an equalizer, and that's a very powerful symbol that we somehow managed to erode over the last 15 years.
Yeah, I think another very eye-catching thing in Parliament, which people really enjoyed watching, perhaps not because of any political agenda, but to see someone as young as Hasnat Abdullah sitting over there, a Gen Z person
or Nahid.
In Parliament, or Nahid, and that kind of evokes some kind of emotion in people that, okay, look at them, they are there.
I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but the day that the lawmakers took oath inside the parliament, I teared up. It was very emotional. It really was. Yeah. This is the first time that we've been able to vote these people into the house that they're supposed to be in. I mean, once again, I don't have to agree with everyone's political belief or their ideology, but the one thing I do have to appreciate is that this is a very representative parliament.
Yeah.
Bangladesh is not a homogeneous society. I mean, we may be one ethnicity, but not mostly one ethnicity. Yeah. Sorry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's not a homogeneous society at all in terms of our beliefs. And that is really being reflected in the parliament. You have people coming from the liberal camp. You have people coming from the conservative camp, people with progressive values, people with regressive values. Yeah. And they're all sitting together for a healthy debate.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't show what our society is like, I don't know what does.
Speaking of healthy debate, during the first sitting, we saw a lot of things happen. Of course, the Speaker of the House was elected, Deputy Speaker was elected, and then the condolence motion was also done. And I want to talk about the condolence motion over here. There was a lot of there's some that's considered very good, some considered not so. Let's say, as Bangladeshis would say, grohonjoggo. So I want to listen to your opinion about the condolence motion.
You're being very diplomatic about it.
Yeah.
You're essentially asking what my opinion is on the fact that we pushed a condolence motion on
war criminals.
Yes.
Yes, convicted war criminals. Please tell me.
You have to beat around the bush. Right.
Force of habit, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah, okay. So shows signs of an early compromise on part of the BNP.
Yeah.
And let's get to why that may or may not be a good thing a little down the line. But there's a reason why I say this. For the Jamaat, it's for Jamaat Islami, which is the main opposition at the moment. For them, this was such a brazen move.
Yeah.
This is the first time that they're participating in parliamentary democracy in a way where their strength and their power is really being, I think, felt by everyone.
Yeah.
They're not on the margins. They're not fringe. They're not an afterthought.
No, they're very, very much present.
They're very much present. They're a formidable opposition.
Yeah.
And they really took that opportunity to get this
the very first
on the
sitting.
very first. They're so brazen to get this passed, which it shows the kind of political leverage that they have in this ecosystem at the moment. Because this is not something that they would have been able to, say, push through if they managed to get, 10 seats or 16 seats, which is, I think, the last time, that's how many they had. But this time with 77 seats in their bag, it's a good time for them to push through something that they believe as a party. It's like this. If you want us to be a part of this democracy, then you also have to adopt our version of the truth.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of messaging that they were going with. And it was a moment that left a lot of the older generations who had gone through the 1971 war, it left them very rattled.
Absolutely.
I do want to say on record that I do not believe in the death penalty.
Right.
I also think that the tribunal that led to the execution of these people who were convicted of war crimes, that tribunal was deeply flawed. It was fundamentally...
And it has been said time and again, they weren't fair trials.
They were not at all fair trials. This was essentially state-sanctioned murder.
Yeah.
And I have to call it murder because that's what it was.
Yeah.
But war crimes did also happen.
Yeah.
Just because the burden of proof or the evidential burden had not been taken seriously enough, I think it's still a bit of an unresolved issue at the moment. So to have this happening on the very first day was slightly unsettling. I'm not going to, at least, I mean, for me and probably for a lot of other people. But I want to also be my own devil's advocate and say that this was, at the end of the day, just a condolence motion for people who were wrongfully killed.
Right.
In a way.
But like you said right at the beginning of your answer, that this was somewhat of a compromise on the BNP government's part. If considering that, do you think this entire issue that came up, war criminals being included in the condolence motion, the BNP government making that compromise, does that open doors or avenues to a new political culture? Or do you think it's a careful construction of a new kind of narrative in Parliament?
A bit of both, but more of the first.
Right.
You see, the speaker himself, he is a freedom fighter.
Yeah.
The speaker, Major Hafiz, we call him. He fought in the 1971 war, and he's a decorated freedom fighter. And so for him to have accepted this without so much as a flinch, I think that shows that this is something that the BNP accepted to get into the good graces of the opposition, because the BNP is holding out on a far larger demand that has been made not just by the opposition, but by the people of Bangladesh, which is the Constitutional Reform Council. The BNP lawmakers did not take their oath as members of the Constitutional Reform Council. NCP did, Jamaat Islami did. And this is something that all of these political parties had committed to when they signed the July Charter, keeping the Parliament House in the backdrop. In front of the Parliament House, keeping it as a witness, they had signed the July Charter. And then they violated it. The minute they took an oath as an MP, they violated it. They're pushing, they're buying time. They're saying that this is something that they're still considering. They're coming up with constitutional explanations as to why this shouldn't happen.
I believe the Home Minister himself has been in this debate with the Jamaat Islami Amir in the second sitting, where he kept saying that we will do it, but in the constitutional manner. It has to be a legislative process. It has to be a legal process. But he is still keeping the door open for conversation, for the debate to happen.
No, that just sounds like he's buying time.
Right.
And so when I saw them accept this condolence motion, to me, it actually felt a bit like a trade-off. Like, okay, well, I'm giving you this, so be kind to me regarding that.
Right.
I saw it more of like a trade-off. I hope that that's not what's going to happen, because people did overwhelmingly vote in favor of implementation of the July Charter. So I do want to see that happening. One of the main sort of reforms which is being proposed by the July Charter includes putting a leash on the ruling party.
Right.
So BNP, other than the fact that they had signed a book in a very highly publicized ceremony, open-air ceremony in front of the National Parliament, they don't really have a lot of incentive to say yes to this. I mean, no ruling party will. I don't want to be speculative about it. I'm just saying by design, the ruling party does not have an incentive to do this other than remaining in the good graces of their constituents, of their people. And if they can make their people, convince their people that it's okay to do otherwise, that it's acceptable to do otherwise, if they can somehow manage to, weather this sort of political storm, then perhaps we may not actually see this happening.
Right. Another one of the more notable incidents that happened in the first sitting of Parliament was the walkout when President Mohammad Shahabuddin came and was about to deliver his speech, and the opposition and NCP, they stood up. There were placards, there were slogans, and then ultimately the walkout. I want to know about that, and where do you think this puts our president in? What kind of position? Does he have anything to do?
I mean, it made for very, very good political TV.
Yeah, it did. Yeah,
it did. This is a precedent which had sworn in Nahid Islam as an advisor in the past interim government. So this is a president who had sworn in the entirety of the interim government. And the president, I mean, there were a few movements during the tenure of the interim government asking for the removal of the president and impeachment of the president, which didn't ultimately gain enough traction to be implemented. Or, the interim government period was a period when anything seemed possible.
Right.
Not everything was as, how do I say it, constitutionally bound as say, a time of a parliamentary democracy. Exactly. So it almost seemed possible, like it could have happened, but it didn't. Right. It didn't. And the president did manage to keep his chair throughout the interim government period. Yeah. So what would happen? I mean, if he is a fascist now, which is what they're calling him, and they're saying that he can't address the opening session of the parliament because he's a fascist and he's a killer, a murderer, an enabler, essentially. If he's a fascist now, he was a fascist back then. What has changed? What has changed? Yeah. One thing that has changed is the fact that the president gave a very...
that interview.
Yes, a very it was very political. It really was. A very political interview to a newspaper where it seemed like it did not befit his position as a president to give that interview. The president is not someone who should be...
It was quite an emotional... he did lay bare some of his emotions, I believe, in that interview, no?
Yes, and then he was also groveling up to the ruling party a little.
Yeah.
That did not leave me feeling like I'm reading the interview of the head of the state. So he ultimately is the head of the state.
Yeah.
And that interview was, the interim government was awful to him, which I'm sure the interim government was. I believe, as a victim, since he's saying I'm supposed to always believe the victim.
Yeah.
All right, I get it. I believe you. But then, there he's also painting the BNP as a savior, his savior, which was, that's not what it's supposed to be like. You're supposed to represent the people. And even people who did not vote for the BNP.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people, for example, those in the opposition party. And I think that this whole walkout was actually a reaction to that. So it had very little to do with the fact that Shahabuddin...
But do you think this particular moment, what do you think it signifies? Is it just political theater or something that shows how this parliament can be shaped in the future?
I mean, it's political theater, of course. It is political theater. They did that because they are hoping to be able to show to people who had voted for them that they're not going to take, some of the impositions of this parliament lying down. And so it really was just like putting on a show for their constituents.
Right.
And that's what they did. And I think that's how it was really taken, because it's not like that was ever really acted upon. And they're not even making any demands, such as, removal of Chuppu as a precedent. I think, being a president in Bangladesh is really, it's not a position where you can have a lot of moral integrity to begin with, because, this is a president who had also served Sheikh Hasina's regime. And I was listening to his opening speech, and he's talking about who the person is. He was talking about how our former president Ziaur Rahman had declared independence of Bangladesh. And I was going back to some of his older speeches where he had said that the Declaration of Independence came from Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And okay, once again, not something I really have an opinion on. I'm not here to argue about who actually declared her independence.
But it says something about the president.
Exactly.
It says something about him.
It says something about him when you're essentially refuting yourself in a span of about 2 years.
Exactly. Another one of the major things that happened is the 133 ordinances that were made by the interim government, issued under the interim government. Those were passed. They were tabled in the first sitting. How important is it for the MPs right now to scrutinize these ordinances and before they're passed? There's 133. That's a lot of backlog.
Do you know how many days they have to do that?
How many? 30. Oh my God.
It's sort of a bit, I think Eid is counted. Like the Eid holidays, the 7-day Eid holidays may be counted in that. I'm not very sure. I have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, but
I hope not. I hope.
But I mean, if you don't count the Eid holidays, that's 133 ordinances. And they have to scrutinize it very carefully.
A completely new parliament. 2/3 of this parliament are comprised of lawmakers who have never been lawmakers before. So they've not actually ever read a law. They've never studied a law for the purposes of amending it, making it, passing it. Yeah. And this is going to be interesting because if they don't manage to do it in 30 days, the laws which don't get passed or get adopted by the parliament will essentially be defunct. And that's very scary because the one thing that the interim government had done was they had put into motion a lot of things in writing that are meant to shape the future of the country. So I'm not just talking about, say, ordinances here. I'm also talking about, say, the July Charter, putting out reform commission reports, things that can, act as a guiding light for the next government. And so the ordinances, regardless of how we feel about them, regardless of how good they are, how bad they are, they were done, they were crafted with the aim that the next government will have a set of laws to go with. And these include ordinances which are very crucial. For example, the one on enforced disappearances.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
There's a new ordinance that's supposed to outlaw unlawful interceptions, unlawful surveillance. So these are very important ordinances for human rights. And this is to make sure that human rights abuses do not happen the way they had in the Sheikh Hasina regime.
Yeah.
So it's really up in the air at the moment. And I truly, truly hope that they will not undo some of the good work which had been done while also being able to improve on some of the spaces where the interim government had fallen short.
Right. On that very note, actually, one of the lines that kept coming up in Parliament, especially from the opposition, is that this Parliament is basically being built on the backs of those who sacrificed their lives during the July uprising. And because this entire new government, this entire new Parliament was possible because of the July uprising, do you think that increases the expectations placed on the MPs? Or how does it change the expectations from the MPs?
You voted in the referendum.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not asking you what you voted for, but you did vote.
Yeah, I did.
And so did I. Yeah. And 68% of the country voted yes in the referendum. They may not have really understood what the referendum stands for.
It was hard to understand.
We've talked about this before. We've talked about how there are some 80-odd changes being suggested, condensed into 4 questions that most people didn't even get. But the fact of the matter is the referendum was done constitutionally and the referendum is binding. So that means 68% of the population are asking for changes that the July Charter is proposing. And a July Charter is it was not just a nod to the kind of Bangladesh that we envision or the kind of changes that should be taken place, but it was also a sort of token of gratitude to those who had given their lives
during the uprising.
During the uprising. It was an acknowledgement of the fact that the lives that they had given will not go to waste.
Yeah.
It's not in vain. And these are lasting changes. We acknowledge that it's because of their ultimate sacrifice that we have, the Bangladesh that we have right now. And so, the parliament that's going into the Jatiyo সংসদ every single day, they will have that one sort of burden to carry, that they do have to implement the July Charter if they truly respect what the sacrifices were made by our students, by our youth during the July uprising.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. I'm not going to romanticize that. I'm not going to glorify that. I'm just going to say that there's a piece of document that we have kept, that we've put in place as a nation, and that they have to adopt it.
Right. When we were talking earlier, actually, I believe during the first sitting of Parliament, we were talking in newsroom, and you used the word rebooted, which is why this is the title of my show today. Yeah. But it was hard-earned. It's rebooted. And as far as I know, you are very adamant in the fact that we cannot stop paying attention to what is happening in Parliament, not this time around. And that is why the Daily Star has created the platform, Parliament Watch. Why do you think it is so important to build this permanent public record of how the Parliament is actually functioning right now?
It's because when we do the news of politicians, like most other news, it's usually daily breaking news. It gets lost in the annals of our archives. Might get like a bit of a space somewhere in the inner pages of our newspaper. And unless the politician is doing something very grave, like a very major case of corruption, he or she's involved in a very major case of corruption, they don't necessarily end up having like a lasting impact on the public's memory. There's a bit of an amnesia. For example, I don't know if you remember, but like right after the election, Cox's Bazar Lawmaker's envoy ran over a child in Cox's Bazar. I don't know if you remember that. So these are things, child, exactly. As it was a 3-year-old child, and I want people to not forget this because this is a person that they've elected. And so I believe that transparency is not about just covering an incident and then letting it slide, but also keeping it in an archive, a permanent place somewhere, so that the people who have voted for these lawmakers can access it easily. It's about making coverage accessible.
Right. As a matter of fact, the platform you created, Parliament Watch, isn't only about what's happening inside the Parliament, but it is a huge documentation of each and every one of the MPs that are sitting in Parliament right now. We have their affidavits, we have how much loans they have taken. We have so much information. And also, of course, the small day-to-day things that are happening inside and outside Parliament with regards to these particular members of Parliament. Why do you think it is important for the public to know these particular information?
It is important for the public to know that most of the wealth is concentrated in Dhaka. That most of their parliament's wealth is concentrated in Dhaka and not in Borishal. It's important for their parliament, for the public to know that this parliament has the highest loans ever compared to any parliament. Like, it's the most debt-ridden parliament. It's important because the public needs to keep tab on what's happening to their lawmaker.
To be able to hold them accountable. Right.
Yeah, we need to be able to see data about our parliamentarians going beyond just their daily speech giving and their daily activities. It's important to know how much tax was paid by these parliamentarians, and that BNP has paid the most tax compared to Jamaat.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, BNP overwhelmingly have the most businessmen, whereas Jamaat is mostly a party of teachers.
And I believe some doctors as well.
Yeah.
But much of the parliament is made up of business people actually this time.
They managed to either get stay orders on their loans, or they manage to get their loans rescheduled at the very last minute. Right. So they have a significant debt burden.
Right. Yeah.
Not necessarily defaulters just yet.
Right.
Not there are these 2 seats in Chittagong, in Chattogram, where the EC is yet to publish the results of those 2 seats and declare who the winning lawmaker is, because the lawmaker is caught up in a tussle with the court regarding a loan he had defaulted on. Well, both of those lawmakers did. So
I am going to have to come back to this particular issue because it has been bugging me so much, the small number of women MPs in Parliament. And we already saw 2 sittings. I do not think we have seen participation of any women yet. And we're still waiting for the reserved seats, 50 reserved seats. That too is not going to come from direct election. They're going to be party nominated. How significant is this gap do you think, when it comes to, say, legislative priorities or policy making? How short are we going to fall?
So I spoke about how important it is to implement the July Charter and respect the wishes of the people and the referendum. And here's my criticism of the July Charter. My criticism of the July Charter is that it does not propose any lasting changes for women. Because, the July Charter was ultimately made through the process of a consensus commission coming together with all of the political parties and talking about what kind of changes they want to see. And, to no one's surprise, the political parties did not necessarily want to see any real changes for women. This is the one demand that women did have.
Some of the demands that the Women's Affairs Reform Commission had made was 100 reserved seats, was direct election.
Yeah.
None of these were given any heed to. Politically, how much backwards are we going to go, at least for women in this case? It's just so disheartening.
I know. So there are 7 elected women in the parliament, and then there are going to be 50 who are going to be selected. So this is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's going to be a man selecting
which women from his party is going to represent.
Is going to be his female partner in the constituency. It's essentially as gross as it sounds.
Yeah.
This is a woman who has been selected by a man to represent the constituency, who will not be given any real budget to work with, and who's just a token face.
And will actually not have any real impactful voice in Parliament.
Will not have a real impactful voice in the Parliament because she's not there as a part of the people's mandate. The people have not voted for her. She cannot go beyond she cannot ever, confront the men who have selected her and given her this prized possession of a seat in the parliament. So she can never really truly confront them. She can't oppose them. She can't debate with them.
Right.
In no way is this an empowering position. We have always seen that the reserved seats were given to women who were family members of lawmakers or things like that. And we're going to see, maybe they're going to go beyond family members this time. This time they're going to be going to the female politicians who were not nominated in the first place, which was, once again, a gross violation of the July Charter. Yeah. Because, you're supposed to nominate 5%. So maybe they're going to be giving these to the women as concessionary prizes.
Yeah.
But this entire process, it reeks of pity. It reeks of the entitlement of men over women.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily have any hope from the reserved MPs because this is not a seat that is empowering in the very least.
Right. Like I said, new Bangladesh, new government, new parliament, very high hopes among the public. And within a month, we've also seen a lot of things. There's been confrontation, boycotts. There's been debate as well. So far, we've seen somewhat debating in parliament as well. Do you think this parliament has the potential to be meaningfully different than what we've seen in the past? Or are we simply just seeing the same old chapters of the opening chapters of the same old story that we've read before?
So regardless of whether the July Charter does get implemented, I think it's still going to be a wonderful parliament. It's not going to be the parliament that we voted for in the referendum, but nevertheless, like, my expectation has really been rock bottom. I just want the bare minimum. I just want an opposition. Really, is that too tall an ask? I mean, during the last parliaments, we saw an opposition that was a waste of taxpayer money.
Yeah.
To be very honest. And this opposition, it seems like they will be truly challenging the ruling party, which is what you want in a healthy democracy.
Yeah.
You never want a ruling party that goes unchallenged. And so, I wait to see whether or not the July Charter will be implemented. But even if it doesn't, we've achieved the bare minimum of a good, healthy parliamentary democracy.
Right. So Zaima, just lastly, I want to know, what do you think? I mean, the first session has not yet ended. We still have a few more sittings. What do you think might be coming up? The ordinances came up. The condolence motion came up. The reform council came up.
It's impossible to predict what will be coming up, and that's exciting.
That's what's exciting. Exactly. Right. Zaima, thank you so much for being with me on my final episode of season 1 of That's What She Said. I opened the show with you. I'm closing the show with you. It's been always exciting to talk to you. And even though I spent hours and hours in the newsroom with you, this is where I learned the most from you. So I love it. Thank you so much, Zaima.
Thank you so much for having me.
The first days of a parliament are always symbolic, but symbolism alone does not build democracy. A parliament proves its worth through debate, scrutiny, accountability, and the courage to question power. The 13th Parliament has arrived after one of the most turbulent chapters in Bangladesh's political history. Whether it becomes a true arena of democracy or another missed opportunity remains to be seen. And ladies and gentlemen, on that note, we are closing season 1 of That's What She Said. Over the past season, we've had conversations about law, power, rights, politics, and the everyday realities women navigate in this country. We'll be back very soon with more episodes, more new and exciting guests, and more conversations that look at the issues shaping our everyday lives through the lens of a woman. Until then, thank you for listening to What She Actually Said. Eid Mubarak and happy holidays.